no tech ops officer that I worked with would have said, oh yeah, let's put machine guns in the Aston Martin. So if you attract attention, you're in a bad place. Hi, I'm Don Meyerriecks. I retired from the Central Intelligence Agency in 2021 as their Director of Science and Technology, known as Q in most parlance. Today, we're going to be looking at spy gadgets in movies and television and judging how real they are. I have to tell you, I love Mission Impossible, and one of the things I love is that it's a team that always enables Ethan to go out. And that is a much more reflective environment where they're, altering the perception of the guard with the video feed. Again, we always start with the easiest thing. So I'm looking at cameras here. Are they networked? So maybe you don't have to bring a device in. Maybe you have a really good exploit that lets you get through the network to the camera, and you can just make sure that it loops, for example. You're going to try and figure out the least risky way to do it in combination with how good the team is you're up against. This part is amusing because what if somebody looks out the window? If we were going to have to do something like that, it'd be the window cleaning day, right? Or something just like there has to be a reason for him to be outside the window. Doing something like this in broad daylight with very complex tech, it's like, okay, so you couldn't figure out how to turn him into the local janitor and get him into the space, right? It's great theater, but it doesn't at all meet kind of how we would think about trying to get into a closed facility. Sometimes tech fails. I love that he's got a plan B because that's exactly why we do mission rehearsal, particularly for things that are stressing like this, than having brainstorm through the, if this failed, what would you do? So that they're not trying to solve it in real time. We have a principle called KISS, keep it simple, stupid, that you want to keep the tech as simple as possible, not because case officers are stupid, but the more complex you make it, the more likely it is that something will go wrong. I'm going to give it a 4, but it's because the front end is really good. The back end just is something we wouldn't contemplate. We would think about a different way to do that than just having them strung up the side of a building in the middle of the day. It is in no way clandestine what just happened there. You are alerting, officials are going to show up. Do we modify umbrellas? Yeah. Probably not to put guns inside of them, no, but it's a lot of fun. Objects like that are just the vessel for transporting something that's important, right? And so it's very often our field officers, our tech field officers will go into the marketplace and see what's on the shelves and then make decisions about how to do it in a way with an everyday object that it fits into, that's non-alerting, that is generally available.
Yes.
The disguised room, I think, is absolutely. Do we put fake walls in walls? Yes, of course we do. And I'm not saying that the room reflects exactly what would be in a trove.
You're going to need a pair of shoes to go with your suit. That is sick.
What I love about it is that they're trying to recruit this young man, and they will go out of their way once they've decided he's the right guy, showing them what's available and what we are willing to do with and for them is certainly part of the recruitment process. So I'm a hard grader, so I will say that I would give this a 3. There are parts of it that I love, but that whole scene out front in the bar is just so over the top. I love the whole idea, but no tech ops officer that I worked with would have said, oh yeah, let's put machine guns in the Aston Martin. So we do modify cars and trucks and all sorts of things, but it really has to be very focused in what the mission needs. So the armored cars, we do have armored cars, right? They are pretty nondescript. We try to make them blend in because if you attract attention, particularly official attention, you're in a bad place. Case officers would love to be given Aston Martins to go do their mission. We do not do that either. At the end of the day, we are a government organization, and that would not be probably appropriate use of taxpayer dollars.
Your watch. It's a radius. Electromagnetic pulse. It'll short any circuit in a hardwired network if you get close enough.
So the high-tech watch is I think, the right idea in terms of what we will modify. We really, really look hard at the environment that the person is operating in, and we don't want them to stand out, right? You don't want a big ostentatious watch if you're in a, in a poor country with very little in terms of commercial goods. And so what we really try to do is, what's the persona that we're creating? What's the profile we're creating?
And smart blood. Shall we?
Well, I haven't had a drink for 3 or 4 hours.
So the Q branch that's demonstrated here is very, very similar to the work, the human work that Science and Technology Organization did. But I had the privilege of running the Science and Technology Organization, and we did 2 main functions. I talked about the technical collection piece, but we also then supported the human operation, documents, disguise, communications devices, all of those gadgety things that you're all familiar with if you watched movies at all. The challenge, I think, with the smart blood is that there's an implication that it emanates. If you're emanating, you're trackable. And very often we'll choose to be safe and just not do that. And we'll perform Overwatch more classically, with people on the street or literal overhead of, in whatever domain kind of thing. Do we do things with planes, trains, and automobiles? Absolutely. It is part of the job. And do we, enhance security in those things? Absolutely, if that's what we need to do. And people know about the SR-71 and some of the other things, the ox cart that was the predecessor. The agency does do bleeding edge, innovative platform work, and that's probably about all I can say about it here. I will say that they're generally used for technical collection purposes and not for inserting people into places that they shouldn't be. That one is a little bit interesting in terms of we don't build planes that also go underwater. So sorry if that was another well-held myth. So the idea that you put something in the middle of the floor and not pick it back up on the way out, if you had to do it that way, would absolutely be a no-no. If they're not detected, of course they are in the movie, but if they're not detected, you don't want them to go back and relook at the tapes and try and figure out if there really was a problem electronically or whether there was something else that was causing that.
Okay. There you go. Around. The main activity should be towards the central hub, which is directly above you.
Yeah, Q's dynamic with Bond is quite realistic. The relationship between the Science and Technology Organization and the Directorate of Operations, which is the folks that do all of the human work and most of the field ops work, is a really tight one. It has to be, because literally that person is potentially putting their life on the line. So this is why it's so important not to leave traces for anything. I'm going to give it another 3.
You want to keep the contracts coming. You'll be selling one thing. The idea that you are ordinary.
So this clip obviously is a little dated, but it depicts an MI6 asset that is spying on the Russians and their nuclear capability. And the camera is absolutely, if you visit the CIA museum, and yes, the CIA does have a museum and you can visit it, you will see something that looks exactly like that camera in there. So that's very realistic. The other thing I think I'll mention is that when assets like this are recruited, the time that we get to spend with them is exactly spent on things like this. How do you use this camera so that when you are in the moment, you're not thinking about the mechanics of using the camera, making it as simple as possible. Just basically, if you slide it, it takes the picture.
One thing. I need to know that if anything happens to me, my wife...
So for a variety of reasons, I would think a meeting in a car like that would be highly unusual. Candidly, if it's a higher echelon Russian, it would be very unusual for them to actually be sharing a car with non-Russians, right? or people that are not normally aligned. If we have a valuable asset, we do not want to risk them. But you can do, I'll say, passes like that in other circumstances. Crowded train stations, any place where there's a big crowd and just like, you hit each other as you walk past. It's the same principle that people pickpocket, very much the same idea. And you also notice how simple is all the tech in all of this, right? There's almost nothing that can go wrong, right? If he screws together the cylinder right, if you're gonna leave a message at a dead drop, we'll call it, right, in a canister, how you do that and the best circumstances to do that under so that it's non-alerting. In this case, it's like, I'm not gonna reach under, a sink in a public bathroom and pick up a canister that's unmarked. Like, ew. All of that is very much the very simple, non-glamorous, but extremely critical technology that we provide to assets.
Hanging by the slenderest of threads.
I think the time lapse between this clip and what happens today is there's a lot more tech out there and available in everyday objects, to be geeky, Internet of Things. Everybody expects things to be smart now, including your toaster. So that gives us a much broader operational canvas that we can paint on that is non-alerting. This is a 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. Whoever did this had great consultants and decided that they were gonna raise the tension by like really putting you into that moment and what that feels like, as opposed to like all the glitzy, spy gear. Do we participate in rescue operations? Absolutely. We do a lot of work with special forces, and it's really, again, a decision about who's best equipped. You look at a lot of things before you went to that kind of great visual sort of let's blow out the side of the building at the appropriate second. That would take a lot of choreography. Again, it would be best to kiss. The agency does use bombs for operations. It's not realistic in this particular scene. You can actually characterize the blast pattern and shape that of an explosive, like to a gnat's eyelash. And so, again, we would characterize the target environment, and then we would make sure, and we actually built them and did dry runs, right? And then provided sufficient overwatch. Yeah, Skyhook is interesting. There are circumstances where you do have to snatch people or objects off the ground very, very quickly. There are a lot of considerations before you decide that that's the only best option available to you. I can't say that it's one that we recommend, but sometimes that's what you do. And I think there are probably plenty of people want to look at videos of special forces and others doing snatch operations basically with that kind of methodology. So anything we invent, we share with special forces as well as law enforcement and vice versa.
We've turned every cell phone in Gotham into a microphone.
Using U.S. person cell phones to create a video feed of the digital environment of the city. Yes, we use cell phones a lot. It is against the law to do anything with a U.S. person in terms of getting into their information, right? That is an FBI role. That stretches credulity. But being able to bring together a bunch of sources of information and then analyze kind of real time and help execution of an operation, yes. We have, computer rooms that are op centers that look like that. I hate to say it, but I'm gonna give this one, I'm back to threes again. There were aspects of it that I thought were really interesting. And I love Morgan Freeman and the whole Batman series, so I won't be any harder than that.
Where is T'Challa?
Well, we are not joined at the hip, Okoye.
So do we use jewelry for spycraft? Absolutely. And again, it's back to what fits the lifestyle of either the case officer or the asset so that it's not alerting, right? But if it's something that's very prevalent and it has enough maneuver room that we can introduce either comms device or a sensing device or whatever, I'll take the hologram as a kind of a bigger observation about virtual reality. Writ large, do we employ virtual reality, augmented reality? Yes, absolutely we do. And that's kind of edgy, state-of-the-art tech for us, so I won't say any more than that about it. So there are aspects, again, of this that I love. Do we provide and invest in, for example, special body armor that protect our officers in harm's way? Absolutely. We do a lot of materials development work, metamaterials to address specific mission challenges. But yeah, a little over the top in terms of whether this is something spies would do.
Driving system activated.
So the remotely driving car, Waymo's got them, Google's got them all over the streets of San Francisco, right? And they're expanding. And I guess it's more autonomous in that case. Do we do remotely controlled vehicles? Yes, we do. I can think about it for maybe airborne or some other things, but car is harder. Is it possible? Yes. And I guess there's a theme here that we haven't really talked about, which is we are not too proud to steal from anybody's imagination, right? So some of the things that we're influenced by are absolutely things that we have seen in movies. And to be honest, a lot of our best disguise designers, we have recruited from Hollywood. There's a lot about this that I like. I hate to say it, but I'm going to give this one a 2 just because it's so over the top. And it doesn't pretend to be spycraft, right? It really is just more like the superhero vibe of like how you would make somebody actually have those kinds of super capabilities.
Wrong. Sonic wave. Just make sure you drop it near a window.
I really like this clip. Do we manufacture things that look like coins and introduce stuff? Yes, and I used to tease people, each of the directorate heads had their own coins and say, and this will work even if it's not near a window, and they would look at me like, it's like, wait, are you telling me that there's something inside of this? And I was just playing around with them. But so yes, we do lots of stuff with coins. There are some things that stretch credulity just from a physics perspective, but all the gadgetry of this one I think is actually, no kidding, a pretty good representation of how things would be done, as long as she couldn't be associated with the explosion, right? The pen and the coin working together is not unusual. If you have very small form factors and that's what you have to work with for the environment, then you could very well, put different components. The physics part of this that I think my explosive ordnance folks would have just gone crazy about is the idea that you could direct energy out a window from a little object laying on the floor. Probably not gonna work that way exactly. But creating a disturbance so that she can go off and do other things, yes, absolutely.
Running the lock to scrambler.
In terms of the descrambler, we actually have a whole team that does breaking and entering, right? And so very often, can it be done mechanically or electronically? Yes. And one of the things they learn to do is get into things in near real time and not leave any indication of that. So it's just an expertise that we cultivate and that we spend a lot of time keeping current. So other than my physics problem, I think this is probably like an 8.5 because I think it's actually, and it gives you that whole frisson of what it's like to have, a very short time and a window to get things in and operate. So the jetpack idea is interesting, and I think everybody is experimenting with it, and so that then becomes problematic. It flies in the face of KISS, right? It starts to get really, really complex. And at the end of the day, they're still a little wonky unless you really know what you're doing in terms of like not burying yourself, you know, going the wrong angle and all of that. And so complicating that more for the case officer or the field ops officer is just something that you don't want to take a hard job and make it that much harder. I like the idea, you know, the bubble gum. And so using objects that people consider unclean or dirty, those are all kind of good bases for, you know, doing something that has other implications or other properties. Do our officers use repels when they're in operation? Yes, but probably more for the covert action kinds of activities than technical or human collection of any sort. So if that's the alternative, you know, their first choice would be, are there stairs we can get you on, or whatever for the operation. But yes, rappelling equipment is used.
Where's my mom and dad? What'd he say? I'll play it backwards.
They're in the dungeon. They're in the dungeon. Hurry.
I will say that natural language processing in combination with AI has gotten really, really good to the point where you can trust it even for highly technical documents. So you can use things like natural language processing AI for translation purposes, but our first goal is always to be able to speak natively with our assets. There's so much nuance lost if you're not able to communicate natively with your asset. Okay, so I'm gonna give this one a 2. It's great cinema, but not great spycraft. So this is another clip that I actually really like. The briefcase. Yes, false panels in anything and everything. Yes. It's a great way actually to pay an asset because you don't want people to see that there's a whole lot of money that's just been passed someplace.
It's everything they want, right?
There are parts of it that are absolutely how we would think about doing things. The sticking a device in the drawer, absolutely. The thing that stretches credulity is that he's doing it in a room with windows next to people that are actually working. I liked all the tech, and I liked the premise. So I'm gonna give this one a 7.
NASA and the combined branches of our military.
And we're not alone. It has penetrated the world and European central banks.
Gained entry to the
I really like this clip. So we are able to get through identity validation systems, otherwise we wouldn't be able to do our job. So that's probably all I'll say about that. I think one of the things I learned in my job is that much of what people characterize as physical security is actually theater. There's a lot of theater associated with physical security.
Authorized to decline.
I love the disguise with the smoke bomb / knock everybody out exception. Because there is nothing clandestine about knocking a room full of people out. That's exactly why we hire people from Hollywood. Actually, the disguise is the least of it. It's where the case officer goes in their head and how they comport themselves. So I think a lot of people, and I think actually Tom Cruise does this well, they're acting. You have to actually assume the character of the person that you're emulating, because it changes the way you carry yourself. So I love that he clearly was, who he was purporting to be right up until the moment that he pulled it off.
What? Ethan, what just happened? You bumped. Bumped? What do you mean bumped?
That's kind of new tech for us, so I probably shouldn't talk about that. I was amused in the scene, though, because the way we use bump, if I arrange to run into you because I want to recruit you, that's called a bump. He talks like she just bumped him, right? And she pickpocketed him. But I love that they used the term. Somebody clearly knew a little bit about what they were doing, but they used it in a way that we wouldn't use it.
This entity has multiple personalities, at times behaving like a computer virus, then a tapeworm, then a botnet.
This clip portrays a rogue AI that's able to assimilate a whole bunch of information from many, many sources and many places and do it near real time. And that is not something that we employ or that we see happening today. When I was at the agency, we had 170 pilot projects evaluating the use of AI across a whole panoply of application. This particular one stretches credulity just because it's more like an AGI, and the tech is just not there yet to do that, right? So I think the rating on this is that this is probably a 6.5, getting up there, right? The tech, I really, the mask and kind of the whole way Tom carries himself is really true to how a case officer has to get in their head in order to be able to pull something like this off. Steve Carell, gotta love him. There are parts of this that are, remind me of real life, usually badly. We do after actions on every operation that we do, and we get very candid feedback from the operators who are inflicted or else aided by the tech. And sometimes we've just way over-engineered it. There were those conversations where it was like, it seemed like a great idea at the time, and it just didn't work in the circumstance at all.
Why are you talking into your shoe?
The old call forwarding from the shoe phone to the cell phone, surprise everyone trick.
Don't move.
I will just say that as a technologist and from a physics perspective, again, putting an antenna in a shoe means that it's very close to the ground and it's not going to have a very big dispersal, and it would be really, really hard to get interesting signal into or out of it. But it's also, that's why he's got it in his hand, right? Is like he had to get it up high enough that the signal would actually get out. And it turns out your head is actually can be used, to propagate signal as well. Clearly, it didn't work here either, because the next thing you see is a gun to his head. That's, again, we never want that X to have an arrow pointing at it. So, yeah, it's fun, but not real. I'm afraid I'm going to have to give this one like a 2 again. My favorite spy gadget in a movie is so mundane that you'll be probably disappointed, but the briefcase in The Americans. And even though that was dated, what I love about that is that it really shows how you can secrete anything, anywhere, in a very visceral way. And the briefcase is just a great example of that. Made astonishing articles just in terms of protecting our officers and our assets as they did the things that the country asks them to do. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, click on the next video.